It all started on April 1st. People dropping out of fights. UFC 223. It's one of my first episodes where I'm going to talk about UFC and do some analysis here and talk about all the drama that's been going on. It's been labeled as a Conor Gate. It's very intriguing subject, and I think it'll make out for some good news and possibly some good fights this weekend. But we'll see how everything goes. But first, before I get into that, I want to tell you about the other news that I have coming up. Ultimate Expression, my clothing line, we're releasing the first shirt of the spring, and we're having a big pre-sale there. The pre-sale is going on until April 13th. Get in on the pre-sale, you only pay $25, and you'll be able to get your shirt size. If you wait until after, the supplies will be down. The price goes to $29 after the pre-sale. Most likely there'll be limited supplies there, and the shirt is on fire. This is one of our most anticipated shirts, so don't miss out. Get yourself one. And we also want to announce 4 new representatives that we have for Ultimate Expression coming up. We'll be making that announcement soon, and you probably see the announcement on our Facebook page, Ultimate Expression, and the Instagram at ULT Expression. So look for it there. The store's link is ultimateexpression.storeenvy.com. That's where the pre-sale's being held, and you got till April 13th to jump in on that deal, so don't miss that. But we're going to get in and explore this Conor Gate a little bit more. This is episode 13, and you're listening to Mega Talks. And you ever think that this is like just a long drawn out April Fool's joke from the Dana White and the UFC? It started with Khabib versus Ferguson. Big anticipation for that fight. Everybody, was anticipating that fight. More or less, they see this as a setup to fight Conor McGregor at 155, the challenge for that belt. We know Ferguson has the interim belt, and everybody thought that Dana had stripped Ferguson of the interim belt. But the stripping was actually of Conor's belt at 155. So Ferguson was going to fight Khabib for the real belt because he had the interim. Ferguson fell down, injured himself, and he's out of the fight. So that put Khabib up, and I believe that puts Khabib as having the belt. But Holloway stepped up in Ferguson's place and was going to challenge to fight for the 155 belt. So interesting enough, this has to ruffle a lot of feathers, between the talk and Khabib's camp and Conor's camp and everybody else's camp, and everybody's gunning for that 155 belt. So as things move on and they progress towards the press conference, we get talking about the Khabib Holloway fight. We also talk about the Rose versus Joanna fight. It's also a title that's on the same card. So they had the press conference. It's I watched the press conference the other night. It was a good press conference, but it's to me they were a little bit out of character. There's a lot of talk. Khabib and Max seemed like they were having a lot of fun, just talking between them. Doing their little normal promotion thing. But after the night moves on and progresses, Conor gets into the building, comes in with his 30 people into the building, hunts down Khabib and the bus that he's on. For whatever reason, I guess they have prior knowledge of which bus he's on, whether it's the blue corner or the red corner. But they attack the bus, and if you haven't seen the video, go to YouTube. You'll see Conor as he runs across, picks up a dolly, and smashes the window. As he smashes the window, Anthony Pettis' opponent, Michael Chiesa, supposedly gets cut. He's got a lot of, stitch work to do from the hospital. And some of the other YouTube videos, you'll see the views from inside the bus. You see other secondhand views, the security holding back Conor, keeping him from throwing bike racks through the bus and other trash cans and miscellaneous items. But it's a little entertaining bit. But nonetheless, we hear about the injuries from some of the fighters, and I believe 3 fights were actually canceled off the card because of the people's injuries sustained on the bus. I think another fighter had some glass embedded in his eye. Rose Namajunas was on the bus. She didn't get hurt, but the story is that she left the bus and, kind of fled the scene to prevent whatever other melee that may ensue afterwards. So I check out YouTube and I see Dana White giving an interview, and I see his picture up there, and a lot of times it's just audio. So I click on it, and it's Dana doing a face-to-face interview, and I was surprised that he's, doing the one face-to-face, and he explains the situation about Conor, how he's disappointed, and to me, he doesn't seem as mad as he was when when he called the reporter so many names. And when I saw that video years ago, you could tell how mad he was. In this interview, he's either, kind of gained his composure, but he doesn't seem as angry. He seems a little disappointed, a little ruffled, but as he goes on to explain that Conor loads his plane up with 30 of his friends, it's a personal jet, flies over to the U.S., confronts Khabib at the Barclay, and the reason he's doing this, or the reason Conor is doing this, because he doesn't like what Khabib done to one of his teammates. But, Conor and his teammate are pretty close, but what surprises me is if they're pretty close, why isn't Khabib, or why isn't Conor already over here, supporting his teammate? He catches a flight a few days before to come all the way to the U.S. to do this first. So Dana explains that Conor's flights are blocked from leaving the country. If he attempts to get on the plane, they'll arrest him. They've got an arrest warrant out for him, and he's going to be picked up, and he doesn't feel like speaking to him on the phone about anything. He's not going to try and contact him. I believe the next day we found out, or that night maybe, that Conor gets picked up, and he's in custody. And today I saw where Dana White gives another interview and talks about he did exchange a little bit contact with Conor, but it really didn't relate to the melee there at Barclay. It's more about, I guess, some business type things that they had going, how he's disappointed maybe in some promotion and some articles that were wrote about him maybe in a certain kind of way that Conor wasn't pleased with. But we hear a little bit of conflict in what happened to Conor after he was picked up. Some say that he wasn't charged, he was just interviewed. Some say he was charged with 3 counts of assault. If I'm looking at it, that's here, in our state, that would be something like 3 counts of battery 2nd degree, some criminal mischief, and inciting riots. I'm sure there's a few other things that they could book him on. So we'll kind of, we'll wait and see how that situation, if there's charges or exactly how that's going to work out for him. But today, watching the different news outlets, we see Dana White giving several face-to-face interviews about the whole situation. And, he's breaking a smile. He's asked several times if Conor's going to fight again, and he doesn't give a definite answer. But we know in the past that he's kicked people out of the UFC for doing a whole lot less than actually, inciting a riot and cutting up people. But going back, to Conor's situation, we don't see any display of evidence of any of assaults from the fighters. Again, we get fighters that drop out of fights for reasons, and we see medical reports. We even see some videos, some pictures of those injuries. We don't see any injuries from the glass, the lacerations, the glass in the eyes. We don't even get to see these guys, the fighters, being checked out by doctors. We check their Twitter, and there's no personal pictures from Twitter. When we know after fights, when fighters go to the ER, they're the first to post to Instagram, the black eyes. They're speaking with the doctor. They're in stitches. We've seen fighters, foreheads get stitched up after fights, but we've yet to see any actual physical injury. I'm not saying there's any shenanigans, but that stuff needs to be reported, and they're reporting everything else. So it's just in the nature to make everybody aware of the damage that was done, just besides a broken window on a bus. And when is the last time we've seen Dana on several different networks giving face-to-face interviews about the fight? Now, some of the last UFC fights I hadn't followed so close, but it's been a bit since I've seen him do an interview on different networks like this. It's hard to say if he'd done that for Jones in the Cormier fight, but I'm assuming that's going to be one of the last times we've seen him on different networks giving interviews, besides just giving, the ESPN interview every now and then. But sometimes we can build a picture and watching everything and apply a lot of doubt to situations instead of taking everything at face value for what it is. And, sometimes when you piece things together, you miss what's already in front of you. So evaluate it at face value, take it for what it is. But you're always in the back of your mind, you're thinking about what does the UFC have the benefit if this was like a big April Fool's joke or just some big mass setup? Are they actually going to gain pay-per-view points out of it? I think not. Yeah, I think if it was a bigger fight, there's better ways to do it than besides pretend like a bunch of your fighters got hurt. But, who knows what we'll find out, and who knows what the truth actually is. But I'm sure it's in there somewhere. We may never know, or we may find out. That would be interesting. But moving on with UFC 223, we discovered that Max Holloway can't make the weight, and he stopped from cutting his weight. I guess they said he was cutting too fast, but he's out of the fight. He's not physically able to fight. Doctors looked at him, took him out of the fight. So they make the fight with Khabib and Pettis for UFC 223. And those names, Pettis and Nurmagomedov, are big names to match up. But some of us know how that matchup, should play out. But as we look at him a little bit closer, we know Khabib is an undefeated fighter. We know he's prone to injury. We know in his last fight, he says he drugged the fight out because he wanted to display that he was durable and that he could fight the full time limit. And we know Anthony Pettis, out of his last 5 fights, that he's only won 2 of those. So he's 2 out of 5. 2 of those losses were title fights against Max Holloway at 145 and RDJ at 155. So he's fought at 45, lost there, fought at 55, lost there, lost some other fights along the way. His last fight was a loss against Dustin Poirier, which it went to the 3rd round. It was a really good fight. But Pettis taps out because he pops a rib out when Poirier forces him into the mount. I believe he had mount or some type of body lock on. Pettis was trying to escape and popped the rib out, and he tapped. But as you watch the fight, we watched cardio of the 2 fighters, Poirier and Pettis. We see them both still, giving 100%. We see the cardio fading. And what do we know about Khabib is that he pushes and he pushes and he doesn't slow down. So when I'm looking at the matchups, you know, Pettis is predominantly a striker. He's good on the ground. He's good off his back. But what do we know about Khabib? That he's a ferocious wrestler. You know, he wrestles bears. But if he takes Pettis to the ground, he's not going to fight him in a typical manner from the guard or anywhere else. He's going to press him up against the cage, force him to the mat, and force him to fight with his back to the cage, or he's going to be trying to take his back. He's not going to fight him face to face. So it's going to be an area where Pettis has to defend his back, and he's not going to be able to, you know, trap and attack off his back, triangle arm bars, as he's finished Ben Henderson with in the past. It's going to eliminate some of his submission game, which I think that's a good game plan, you know, going into the fight for Khabib to stick with and more than likely be successful. But, you know, another thing to bring up is how durable is Pettis through the fight, because after the rib injury, that fight was back in November. He's had a few other injuries. You know, this type of guy that, you know, when he gets hurt, is more in fights. And I've heard his trainers talk about how, you know, how hard he works in the gym. Even if he's hurt in the gym, he still keeps moving. A lot of his bigger injuries are in the cage during competition rather than out in, you know, in practice or his training camps. So we'll see. As Holloway said, we'll find out everything on Saturday night. And we'll also take a look at the Rose Namajunas fight versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk. You know, it's a rematch. Joanna lost the last fight. Jędrzejczyk took some damage. Nice left hook, which dropped her, and Rose finished her off. It was a nice display of striking. When I think about this upcoming fight, I see more of the same, because it was an early stoppage and we didn't get to see any more what Rose had in store for her. So, I mean, that's more to the puzzle, you know, to figure out as the fight moves on if it goes past the first round. She was just getting started. Joanna didn't get her timing down. He wouldn't make it past the first round. We make it past the second. We get into deep waters in the championship rounds to see how they perform against each other. That's what's going to make the difference in this fight, the length of the fight. But I see more of the same striking, if not anything fancier from Rose, because we know her accuracy with her punches is going to make a difference. Joanna, she fights well, she strikes hard, but she leaves herself open to a lot of different types of counters. And find out on Saturday night. But I wanted to put this special podcast out because all the talk, and I was, you know, been following this a whole lot more since the Conor Gate is going on. I thought it was a decent card before. Yeah, I think the card is a little bit weaker now. It's sunk a little bit, but I'm still looking forward to the 2 title fights on the card, and also looking forward to seeing Felice Herrig fight. So, not going to put any more plugs here, but if you guys want to catch the fight, go ahead and watch the fight. Don't forget about the pre-sale that I got going. Check out those links, and hope you guys are really stoked about the shirt, because I know it's fire, and I've been getting a lot of good feedback from everybody about it. So make sure you get your orders in before April 13th. Only $25. And I'll catch you next time here on Mega Talks.